Hello, my friends. Just want to have a short conversation of sorts with you today of the things that I've seen that have taken place since the eclipse came. First off, there's a different kind of feeling that I've been having since it, almost as if like something was complete that I don't even know what. It's a different kind of feeling. And I may have some kind of insight into that. I'm not even sure, but just going upon what I'm thinking, we know that the Hebrew year, the new Hebrew year, began the day after that. So the eclipse came and went, and then the very next day was the new Hebrew year. And we do understand that there's a period of cutoff. For instance, whenever Daniel is talking about the 70 weeks, and he's speaking of the Messiah being cut off after the 62nd week and would have nothing, that was when Jesus was on the cross and he was put to death, and then he had nothing as his people had abandoned him. He had divorced those who were Jews. He had fulfilled the old covenant, and then there was a period of pause before the new covenant was poured out over the earth. And we understand the apostate church and what they believe. They believe that God's going to come back and rescue the Jews because they don't examine things upon what they're doing. They don't look at the fruits. They only look at the names and what things are called, the outside appearance. And that's why they don't know who they are or who anybody else is. And that's why they believe that the wrong people are fulfilling the scriptures of God. So we have that period of cutoff. And it's almost like something has happened that was a period of cutoff, because we know that they love to use the Hebrew calendars and Hebrew feast days, and they go into their Hebrew language and all of these things Jewish, because it's the first coming that they don't accept yet, not the second coming. They're all about the second coming, but you can't have the second without the first. What Passover is today, for instance, that's coming up on the Jewish calendar, what this new Hebrew year is. Do you know that the Hebrew calendar was given specifically to the Jews so that by that calendar they would know when the Messiah was to come? The Hebrew calendar wasn't the original calendar of God, and we understand that there was the Enoch calendar, and then there was the creation calendar. Well, there was also the Hebrew calendar, but it was given for a purpose. And the purpose of it was so that the Jews would know when Messiah was to come exactly and fulfill all things of that calendar and of that covenant and to that people. That Passover, for instance, their Passover day, it points to Jesus Christ. And if you believe in the Lord Jesus, you know he has already fulfilled Passover day, as he was the firstborn who was hung on a cross and killed. Passover pointed to Jesus, not Jesus pointing to the Passover day. And this is why they're backwards with all of their understanding. That's why they're looking to Passover. Oh, the Lord's going to come. I saw a video the other day, 10 reasons why Passover means the rapture, because they're looking at everything Hebrew, not recognizing that calendar was only given to show Christ. So guess what that calendar is going to show if they continue to look at that? It's going to show a Messiah, just not Jesus. It's pointing to the Antichrist. They're going after the Antichrist, believing that it's Christ that they're seeking, and that's why God says that everything is backwards in the end. They will say that they worship God while at the same time killing his people. It's what is up is down and down is up, and that's the days that we're living in. So why they go after all these calendar dates is because they reject the first coming. They don't realize that the Hebrew calendar pointed to Jesus. Talk about tabernacles, Jesus fulfilled that. Passover, Jesus fulfilled that. First fruit, Jesus fulfilled that. Everything that was the Hebrew calendar was written to do pointed to him, and they don't believe that. They believe that, oh, there's still more to come. There was just a pause. He's going back to the Jews. Well, no, he's going back to his people, which are they who are saying he's going back to the Jews, because they themselves don't realize that they are the Jews, because they're not looking at the fruits. They're looking at those who call themselves Jews and those who live in Israel and those who want to build up another temple and saying that's God's chosen holy people. He will come back and rescue them. They don't need to believe in him at all. Well, they had that 2,000 years ago. That was already fulfilled in them. When the temple was destroyed ultimately in 70 AD, that was the end of that. You were either in Christ or you were not, and that's how easy it is to recognize the end times. If somebody is against Christ, you know they're against you. Somebody is for Christ, you know they are for you. And if somebody is for you, they cannot be completely against you. That's like this people. They have a form of religiousness. They have their traditions, and they have what they've been taught and think that they believe of God, but they don't examine the fruits. They only look at outside appearance. Thus they get everything wrong of what God is actually fulfilling and to whom. So of course they look after these religious days of Jews and believe that they still mean something to us. So you have all of this going on. And then you also have all of the people out there, I've begun seeing it happen. They're starting to get away from their belief in the rapture. Like it was a seed that was planted, but then it's being taken away now because, again, people that don't really believe have begun falling away, saying, well, this eclipse came and went, there was no rapture. I guess there is no rapture. We're going into the tribulations, we're done. So now you have a whole bunch of them beginning to leave this because they've been told repeatedly over and over again that something is going to happen, but it doesn't happen. Because they're not really looking for Jesus to appear, they're looking at the signs and believing in them. When a wicked and adulterous generation is not given a sign but the sign of Jonah. We will see the sign of the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great glory when he comes. That is the sign given to a wicked generation. We can put meanings and interpretations to all the signs that we're seeing and know that we're in the period to keep on guard, to keep watch. But it doesn't mean that the Lord is going to appear at any of these physical signs. But they who put their hope in the signs because they are Jews, that's what they look for. And when those signs don't become fulfilled, they lose their faith because they never had any faith to begin with. Just like the Jews of 2,000 years ago. They're looking for something that is opposite of what they should be looking at. So you have this now where I've begun to see it where people are going away from the rapture that they supposedly believed in, the rescue, and they're starting to agree more with those of, yeah, it looks like we're going into the tribulations. And it's because they're either fearful, prideful, or they have been led astray into believing what they believe, handed over to a great delusion because they have not loved the truth themselves. And that's the hard pill to swallow for those of us who are actually watching these things play out. That even the rapture is going to be taken from them. They're not going to believe it anymore because they never really believed it to begin with. They believe that they need to work with their own hands. They need to go through tribulations in order to prove something to God that they're His. Whenever we don't do a thing, the rescue doesn't come for us. It comes from God. It's a gift. It's those who win the race of faith, not who win the race with their own hands' works. But again, these things they don't believe or understand because they are Jews. So I've seen that happen. I've also seen a great multitude of people mock those who have said to watch for things. Like, for instance, during the eclipse. We need to be standing on guard all the time because we're seeing prophecy appear in front of our very eyes. If you look in Luke, for instance, like I was reading the other day, there will be signs in the sun, the moon, and the stars. Check that off. On earth, the nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. You can check it off. People will faint from terror, apprehensive of what is coming on the world, and heavenly bodies will be shaken. Look at all the signs we're seeing appear in the heavens. Once in a generation, once in a lifetime, once in 1,000 years. And they're all happening successfully and in succession. And at that time is when you will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds in power and great glory. And when these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads because you know your redemption is drawing near. It means when you see all these things happening, you know that the Lord is coming. Stay awake. Stand on guard. Don't let, because a sign comes and passes you by and nothing happens, believe that nothing has happened, because what it is fulfilling His prophecy, saying that these things were going to happen as He comes closer. But what they're doing is making a false prophet into being one who is watching, or at least one that says they're watching, because they're not. Most of them that were watching things such as the eclipse don't really believe what they're watching in the first place, but they're watching it nonetheless, and they're not falsely prophesying. Because if you can go down this list and check them off saying, when you see these things, check, 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 We know we should be looking, so let's look at the eclipse and maybe something's going to happen. Check, check, check. It's not falsely prophesying. You're not being a false prophet. For if you're calling anyone a false prophet in that case, it would be Jesus. Because you're saying that you're telling us to watch for all these things, but they didn't happen, so you must be a false prophet, Jesus. That's, in other words, who they're calling a false prophet, and they're condemning themselves in the process. Now, you do have those ones out there that spoke presumptuously because they're lying about their walk. They're saying, the Lord told me, the Lord did this. He's definitely coming on April 8th. He told me so. He revealed it to me. No, they're speaking presumptuously. They do not know the Lord. The Lord never came and gave them that understanding. So if they said on April 8th, the rapture is that day, God told me it was going to be that, of course we know that they're falsely prophesying, because they're taking the authority of the scriptures of God, which we have right here in front of us of what to watch for, and they're putting their own authority over it. And it didn't happen, so they spoke presumptuously. Those ones are false prophets. But I don't see that happening near as much as the people who are just saying, look, all of these things are happening. We should be paying attention. We should be standing on guard. Let's watch that day as if we believe something is going to happen, because it could. They're conflating one thing with the other and lumping them in the same group. And it's just like a society of iniquity that we live in. Because, for instance, if you say, well, I don't like that person because they're not doing a good job for me, and that person is of a specific ethnic, race, background, creed, country, whatever it is. If you say, well, I don't like that person because they're not working good for me, I'm going to fire that person because of that. Well, then they're going to claim the victim, because they're going to say, well, no, it's not because of my work, it's because you hate my people. And then people get on their side and back them up over that. You can see all these examples of culture of what is happening within the body. But in reality, the person saying, no, I fired you because you were not doing a good job, has nothing to do with your people that you're saying. But they make it to be that. That's like this exact situation is a different kind of example of it. They're saying that a false prophet is one who is telling you to watch or stay on guard, the very same as they're saying that a false prophet is one who is taking the Lord's name and declaring that he said this, when they're two different things. But they're heaping judgment upon themselves without realizing it. They're basically claiming that Jesus was the false prophet because all these things are happening and nothing happened on the event that we said to watch for. So that must mean that none of these things are happening to mean his coming, which would be a lie, as he declares it specifically in Luke 21, he declares it in Matthew 24, he declares it in Mark 13, what to watch for of his appearing. That's why I said no matter what happens on any of these dates, stand on guard and let no one take from you what you have. Let no one snatch away from you your faith, because A, it's not possible. If you truly believe in Jesus and you're born again, you know him, it is impossible for man to sway you. It is impossible for the devil to sway you. He can tempt you and you can stumble along the path until you be refined, but he cannot take away from you what God has given. And you can tell anybody that lives in fear, that gives power to Satan, because they will specifically say, well, we don't want young Christians to hear this because it's going to make them lose their faith. Nobody can make you lose your faith if God has given it to you. But they don't really believe any of these things that they say unless you're seeing already a falling away take place that is different than the falling away that has already taken place. It's like a second step in a falling away, where now you're beginning to see people having things taken from them that they believed in a different way, because we're walking in these times of the very end of the age, and we know exactly what that looks for because the Lord has told us that. So we have all these different things happening within people, and it just feels like things are different, as though maybe that was a cutoff period, because right before the Jewish New Year comes into play, we had that eclipse, which would signify the death on the cross, the death of the Spirit. Maybe the Lord has completed his works with the Gentiles. And maybe we are right now in that transition period between, like it was when Jesus was crucified and when Pentecost came, where it's that transitional middle period between two covenants, because there will be a new covenant to come. This covenant that we have right now that is in Jesus Christ, it transforms into a millennial covenant. It's the same covenant, just with different parameters, the same as all covenants are. It's like we're in that period of transition from the covenant of grace into the covenant of the millennial. And then we know at the end of that, the best part about it is that the covenant of the millennial, that transforms into the covenant of eternity, where we have our 1,000 years with the Lord in what we call these bodies. And at the end of that, we don't know what's going to happen. We couldn't even imagine what's going to happen, but we know we'll never turn back to what we have had now, because we will never mourn or cry again when the millennial begins, as all tears will be wiped from our eyes as soon as we see him in the air and we're caught up to him. So that's a different story altogether. I don't really want to go on to that topic, but just understand this. Let no one attempt to deceive you or take from you what God has given, because if you're in the Lord, they can't in the first place. But also, you don't need to stumble by them, so that you need to be refined further by God after it. You don't even need to stumble. Understand and recognize by what they're saying that they're fulfilling scriptures, that in the last days, those kind of people will come, and they will deceive the very elect if it were so, meaning let them stumble. These kind of ones I'm seeing now rise all over YouTube. I'm seeing people that had large followings now begin to lose their followings. I'm seeing people begin to transition from talking about, the eclipse being a sign to now we're going all fully Hebrew, because that's who the Jews are going to be handed over to, the synagogue of Satan, just as it was for the apostles, where they will be handed over to synagogues and flogged. That's going to happen to those who call themselves Christians today. They're going to be turned over to the Jews. The Jews are who is going to come into power by means of Satan. And very well, the Jewish calendar may be the rise of the Antichrist. And at the same time, they're saying that Christ is going to appear on these days, which maybe he will. Maybe his appearance is on the same day, let's say, as the Jewish Passover, because one ascends and one descends. It might be so. I don't know. But if you're looking towards the wrong Messiah, you're going to get the wrong Messiah. And that's what I mean by stay on guard. Always look towards Jesus and nothing else, because if you look towards him, you cannot be led astray by anything that anybody tells you, because you won't be able to believe it, because God has given you Jesus to have faith in, and nobody can take him away from you. So these are just some things that I've seen and wanted to kind of speak of. Stand on guard, because we do not know what is going to come. We do not know how far we are going to get into this. We do not know what we are yet to see until his arrival. Stand on guard. Recognize that we are at that very end, and that he is coming to take us, because his life was already shed for us. It was already given up for us. Those who are alive in the end, it's already been given up to us for those who believe. And let no one attempt to take that from you, because it will result in troubles for you that you need not participate with. For he is coming, and we do not know exactly what to expect or what to look for. But we know as long as we stay in him, no matter what, we cannot be troubled by the schemes of the devil, and by the schemes of the world, and by the schemes of those who have fallen away from God. No matter how good they sound when they speak it, we cannot be led away from the Lord. Stand on guard as we wait. Continue to go out every night and look up as if the Lord is returning then. For that is the period of time that I believe we are in. Stand guard. God bless.